The life of a rock star seems like the ultimate fantasy of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But behind the glamour lies a terrifying reality, a secret club with the deadliest membership fee. This is the Overdose Club, 7 music legends who had the world at their feet but lost their lives to the very vices that define them. Jimi Hendrix, the guitar, God choked by his own vomit. Jimi Hendrix wasn't just a musician, he was a revolutionary, a guitar virtuoso who completely redefined the sonic possibilities of the electric guitar. His incendiary performances at Woodstock and the Monterey Pop Festival are permanently etched into the annals of music history. He was the undisputed king of the 1960s counterculture, a symbol of freedom and psychedelic exploration. But this immense talent and the relentless pressures of fame came with a dark side, a growing dependency on substances to manage the chaos of his rock star lifestyle. On September 18, 1970, in a modest London hotel room known as the Samarkand, the 27 Club gained its most iconic and devastating member. Jimi Hendrix was found dead, having tragically asphyxiated on his own vomit after a sleeping pill overdose. The official cause was listed as barbiturate intoxication. He was just 27 years old. The man who could command the attention of 500,000 people with a single searing guitar note died alone and helpless, a direct victim of the chaotic drug-fueled excess that the music industry not only tolerated, but often expected from its biggest stars. His death was a seismic event, a devastating loss that signaled the dark, crashing end of the peace and love 1960s counterculture dream. Jimi Hendrix's overdose became a stark warning, a tragic blueprint for the rock and roll deaths that would follow. It proved that even the most seemingly invincible artistic genius was vulnerable to the deadly combination of drug abuse and the isolating pressures of superstardom. Jimi's death shocked the entire world. If you're a fan of his music legacy, hit the like button. Janis Joplin, the soulful voice, silenced by heroin. Janis Joplin was a force of nature. She poured every ounce of her personal pain, her deep insecurities, and her wild passion into her music, becoming the undeniable queen of psychedelic rock and the raw, emotional voice of a generation. Her performances were exorcisms, celebrated for their bluesy, uninhibited power. But offstage, away from the blinding lights, she battled intense loneliness and a fragile self-esteem, often self-medicating with a dangerous cocktail of drugs and alcohol to cope with the immense pressure of fame. On October 4, 1970, in a cruel twist of fate just weeks after Hendrix's passing, Janis Joplin was discovered lifeless in her room at the Landmark Motor Hotel in Hollywood. The cause was a heroin overdose, likely compounded by heavy alcohol consumption. She was 27 years old. The coroner's report suggested a chilling possibility. She had likely been given a purer, more potent batch of heroin than her body was accustomed to, a common danger in the unregulated world of substance abuse. Her death was not just a statistic, it was a profound cultural loss. Janis Joplin's tragic end is a brutal and enduring reminder that even the most powerful and unique voices can be permanently silenced by the ravages of addiction. Her story highlights the specific dangers of hard drugs like heroin and the devastating impact of the rock and roll lifestyle on those who are emotionally vulnerable, despite their outward appearance of strength and confidence. Janis's story is a painful lesson in the dangers of heroin. Share this to spread addiction awareness. Jim Morrison, the Lizard King's final bath. Jim Morrison, the charismatic, controversial, and intellectually restless frontman of The Doors, embodied the rebellious, dark, and poetic spirit of rock and roll. As the Lizard King, he pushed boundaries both on and off the stage. But by 1971, he was profoundly burned out, disillusioned with the very rock star cliché he had helped to invent and perpetuate. He fled to Paris with his girlfriend, Pamela Courson, in an attempt to escape the celebrity lifestyle and reinvent himself as a serious poet. On July 3, 1971, his girlfriend found him dead in the bathtub of their Paris apartment at 17 Rue Beautreillis. The official cause was listed as heart failure, but it is widely and credibly believed to have been the direct result of a heroin overdose. Critically, no autopsy was ever performed, fueling decades of conspiracy theories and mystery. Jim Morrison was 27 years old, making him the third iconic member of the 27 Club in under a year. His death, in a bathtub reminiscent of a classical Greek tragedy, cemented his legendary, mythical status. His passing also served to highlight the deeply self-destructive nature that ran like a fault line through the rock and roll lifestyle. Morrison's overdose, whether from heroin or a combination of substances, became the final, dramatic act of a life lived at the very edge, a stark warning about the perils of hard drug use and the psychological toll of fame. Morrison's death remains shrouded in mystery. What's your theory about what really happened? Comment below. Keith Moon, the wild man drummer who partied himself to death. Keith Moon, the drummer for the legendary rock band The Who, was not merely a musician, he was a hurricane of unbridled chaos and creativity, the absolute embodiment of rock and roll excess. His legendary destructive antics, blowing up hotel rooms, driving cars into swimming pools, were almost as famous as his revolutionary explosive drumming style. For years, the music world watched his antics with a mixture of awe and amusement, often glorifying his hard-living lifestyle as part of his genius. But the party, as it always must, eventually had to end. Years of severe alcoholism and rampant drug abuse had taken a catastrophic toll on his physical and mental health. On September 7, 1978, Keith Moon was found dead in his London flat, which he shared with his girlfriend. The cause was an accidental overdose on heminevrin, a prescription drug specifically given to him to combat the life-threatening symptoms of alcohol withdrawal. He was 32 years old. The coroner's report ruled it an accidental death, a direct consequence of his addiction. Moon's story is particularly tragic because he was actively, though unsuccessfully, trying to get clean. His body, however, was already too damaged from over a decade of relentless substance abuse and alcohol poisoning. The world's wildest drummer, the man who seemed to be the living embodiment of a never-ending party, was finally and tragically silenced, a victim of the very lifestyle that made him famous. Keith Moon's story shows that even when you try to stop, sometimes the damage is already done. Subscribe for more real stories from the dark side of music. Bon Scott, the AC/DC frontman who drank himself to death. Before Brian Johnson sang Back in Black, there was Bon Scott, the original irreplaceable voice of the hard rock titans, AC/DC. His raw, sleazy, and high-voltage swagger absolutely defined the band's early, groundbreaking sound on hard rock classics like Highway to Hell. Tragically, the lyrics of that very song would become a grim and prophetic epitaph for the singer himself. Scott was known for his hard-drinking lifestyle, a persona that seemed to be a perfect match for the band's raucous image. On February 19, 1980, after a night of typically heavy drinking at a London club, Bon Scott was left to sleep it off in a friend's parked car. The next morning, he was found dead, cold, and alone. The official cause was listed as acute alcohol poisoning. He had, like Hendrix, literally choked to death on his own vomit. He was 33 years old. His death was not a mysterious heroin overdose in a five-star hotel. It was a cold, lonely, and brutally unglamorous end in the front seat of a car. Bon Scott's death served as a stark, sobering reality check about the specific and often underestimated dangers of extreme alcohol abuse within the music industry. It was a jarring reminder that the rockstar lifestyle could be just as deadly with legal substances as it was with illegal ones, and that the party culture could have the most final of consequences. Bon Scott's death almost ended AC/DC forever. This story deserves more views to spread its important warning. Kurt Cobain, the grunge icon and the shotgun. Kurt Cobain, the frontman of the band Nirvana, became the reluctant and unwilling spokesman for Generation X. Almost overnight, his band's explosive success catapulted the grunge music scene from Seattle's underground into the global, unforgiving mainstream. But Cobain was deeply philosophically opposed to and emotionally crippled by the sudden, immense fame, battling a painful combination of chronic depression, debilitating stomach pain, and a rapidly worsening heroin addiction that he used as a form of self-medication. On April 5, 1994, after deliberately escaping a rehab facility in Los Angeles, Kurt Cobain was found dead at his Seattle home from what was ruled a self-inflicted shotgun wound. His suicide note poignantly cited his inability to cope with the trappings of fame and his overwhelming addiction. A toxicology report revealed that at the time of his death, his system contained a massive lethal dose of heroin along with Valium. He was 27 years old, forever linking the grunge era with the cursed 27 Club. Cobain's death was not just a suicide, it was the final desperate act of a man consumed by depression and drug dependency. The overdose was a key, contributing factor that clouded his judgment and deepened his despair. His tragic end marked the definitive, devastating end of the grunge era, serving as a painful cautionary tale about the intersection of mental health, artistic pressure, and the substance abuse. Kurt Cobain's struggle with addiction and fame is a painful, modern lesson. Hit the bell icon for more real stories from the world of music. Tom Petty, the Heartbreakers' silent killer. Tom Petty always seemed different. He was a survivor, a respected elder statesman of heartland rock who had seemingly navigated the music industry's many pitfalls for over 4 decades with his integrity and talent intact. His death in October 2017 shocked fans worldwide because it appeared so sudden and unexpected. The truth, however, was far more insidious and reflective of a modern crisis. Unbeknownst to the public, Tom Petty was in significant pain, suffering from a broken hip, but still honor-bound to complete his band's 40th anniversary tour. His autopsy report delivered a shocking verdict. Tom Petty died from an accidental multi-drug overdose. A deadly toxic cocktail of fentanyl, oxycodone, temazepam, and other prescription painkillers had overwhelmed his system. This was not a case of a young artist experimenting with street drugs. This was a tragic result of a man in his 60s trying to manage severe, chronic pain in an era of highly addictive opioid prescriptions. He was 66 years old. Tom Petty's heartbreaking story proves with devastating clarity that the overdose epidemic is not confined to the shadows of rock and roll cliché. It is a modern, pervasive crisis that also lives in the world of prescription pill addiction, and it can claim even the most seasoned, stable, and beloved artists. His death bridged the gap between the old-school rock excess and the contemporary opioid crisis, showing that the threat has evolved but remains just as deadly. Tom Petty's death shows the modern, frightening face of the overdose crisis. Share this video to spread awareness about the dangers of prescription drug abuse. From Hendrix to Petty, the pattern is clear. The music industry's overdose club spans generations. These stories expose the toxic combination of unlimited drugs, immense pressure, and a culture that glorifies self-destruction. The greatest tribute we can pay is to stop romanticizing these tragedies and recognize addiction as a treatable disease. Share this video to help break the cycle and end the glorification of this tragic lifestyle.